You're listening to Dare to Transform, where we find the vision, dedication, and motivation behind inspiring stories of transformation. This is episode number 2, How to Change the Game. I'm your host, Angela Harris, founder of Work of Heart, bringing you a Missing Link Technologies production. My guest today is someone who I have a great deal of admiration and respect for, Moncton Mayor Don Arnold. Elected as a mayor in May 2016, Don Arnold brings a vision to moving Moncton forward by building a stronger, more transparent, and economically sound city. She was first elected in 2012 as councillor at large and quickly earned the reputation of being one of Moncton's most active, involved, and accessible councillors. In 1999, Don became involved with the Fry Festival and served as its chair for 15 years. The Fry Festival is Canada's only international bilingual literary festival, that's a mouthful, and has become one of Moncton's most popular events, attracting international authors and bringing more than $1 million into the community every year. Her bio could likely fill 4 pages, so I'm going to stop there. Madame Mayor, welcome to Dare to Transform.
Why, thank you, Angela. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So we're very excited to have you here this morning for a number of reasons. Your story is, I love to talk to you. Every time I run into you in an event or somewhere in the city, I get energized. So of course I wanted to have you on. So as we get started, can you talk a little bit about, maybe the early years of your career and how you got to where you're at today?
Yeah, sure. So I've always been interested in books and learning and critical thinking and that sort of thing. So my career really started at a publishing company in Toronto, but I was thinking about the fact that we talk about networking a lot. I know you and I have been involved in a lot of situations where we really encourage people to network and how important it is. And I was thinking over my career, just as I was driving here this morning, virtually every job I've ever had has been as a result of making connections with people. Yeah. And so starting out in university, I went to the University of Toronto, studied French and English literature, and I knew I wanted to work in publishing, but it was hard to get into publishing. Yeah. But I knew that back in the small town in southwestern Ontario where I grew up, there was a woman that went to my church and her daughter had a publishing company in Toronto. So I made a connection there, started babysitting her kids, chasing after her dogs, and doing awesome. All kinds of crazy things like that. And then eventually, got a position working at the publishing company. And that's really how it all started. So and then went on to, we moved to Ottawa. And again, I knew I had a contact there. And I literally... I stalked her. I would wait. I would call her secretary.
Is what you need to do.
I would call her secretary and find out where she was going to be, and then just be there at the elevator as she came out of her meeting and say, "Hi, I'm in Ottawa now. I would love to work for you." And that's.
Well, some people call it stalking. Some people call it being persistent. Whatever words you want to use. Yeah. But really, I agree. I think it's about relationship building. And
absolutely.
I think it's about finding common ground and asking people questions. So.
For sure. And so, we just, that's how it kind of went. And then, of course, with this publishing background that I had over the years, moving to Moncton, it was going to be very difficult to do it at the same level, just that, you have to be in a larger center. And for me to be in publishing specifically, I would have to be traveling a lot, New York, Toronto, that sort of thing. So I just randomly saw something in the paper that there was a group of people interested in starting the Fry Festival, and that North at Fry had spent its formative years in Moncton. And so I reached out and I said, "Hey, this sounds awesome. I'd like to be a part of it."
Amazing.
And the rest is history. Yeah, it's 15 years.
Yeah, 15 years there.
It's 20 years old this year. I can't believe it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And so what inspired you to, what inspired you to become a mayor? Was that something that, was that, growing up, were you I want to be in politics, I want to be an elected official?
I don't think I ever thought about it. I didn't come from a political family at all. I wouldn't be able to tell you who my parents voted for. Okay. No idea.
Yeah.
But I was student council president in grade 8 and grade 13,
Okay.
because there was grade 13 in Ontario at the time, and definitely I was on student council at University of Toronto. So I guess it's probably not that surprising, but the reality is it was 2012, March break, and I was with my family in LA actually, and for some strange reason I had to go back to the hotel room. I really don't ever watch TV, but the TV was on, and it was on I think CNN or Fox or something, and a Republican senator was doing something that I found very, very offensive, and I just became irrationally angry and said...
Irrationally angry?
Irrationally angry. And
totally
I said,
that.
Oh my goodness, we need more women around decision-making tables. Things like this would not be going on if women were part of the decision-making process. And I just decided right then, it was like this big epiphany.
Like a lightning bolt.
I have got to do this. And so I just came back and said, I'm going to run. So I ran as councillor at large, and I did that from 2012 to 2016. Okay. And then in 2016, after you've been a councillor at large, so you're already representing all of the citizens. It's hard to affect change as a councillor, but when you're mayor, you do a lot more of the agenda setting, and you can, get things, kind of affect the tone more. And that was very interesting to me.
Amazing. And so 2016, so you're like coming up on 3 years as mayor?
May. Yes, it will be 3 years in May.
So it's a super easy job, right?
Oh, yeah, nothing to it.
The audience can't see me like seething with sarcasm here, but so like what does a typical day look like for you? Do you have, I that's kind of a crazy question, but like what does a day look like?
It really runs the gamut. Yeah. It really does. I'm pretty passionate about doing programs with kids, so I spend some time doing that. But today I have the American Consul General coming in it's the first time I've met him, so just to sort of establish a relationship. But it can go, developers, investors that are in town, everything from, the ballet to the sex workers action group. I mean, it really runs the gamut,
right.
And then there's, distraught citizens because their garbage hasn't been picked up.
Right.
And, it really, no day is typical. You never know
what's going to happen.
No, you just never know.
That's amazing. So how do you handle all that? Like, what does your... do you have either morning routines or evening routines or things to like deal with stress? Like I know exercise is a big one for you. Yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, riding my bike is really important. So
I wanted to talk about your infamous bike. Yes.
Well, and it was a wonderful summer last summer, and being able to, I think there were only 2 days I couldn't ride it. It was a wonderful summer, and I really miss it. I'm not adventuresome enough to bike during our winter.
No, with, like treaded tires.
No, I don't think I have that in me. But it allows you to see the city in a different way, and it allows you to interact with people in a much different way when you're on your bike. And I just find it incredibly healthy. But people are like, "Oh, isn't that great? You do it." But it's for me. It is my mental health.
Yeah.
And I really missed it in the fall when I had to stop doing it. So I've kind of upped the yoga lately. So I'm very fortunate. There's a yoga studio right across from City Hall. And some days when I just like, I'm not sure I'm making good decisions. I go to a yoga class, and I'm telling you, it's been transformative for me.
Yes, yeah. I can't say enough about yoga and meditation and just like, kind of taking time to just be. Yeah. Which, when you're a busy person and you have a lot of ideas going on, and you're usually at a hectic, fast pace, to like lay down guilt-free and just be. It's as you said, it can be very transformative. And I end up most of the time, either when I do yoga or I've done the floating here in Moncton as well, I walk out of there and I always have more clarity.
Oh, for sure.
I have ideas that just, I think if I hadn't done that, they wouldn't have come. So
because there can be really bad energy that sometimes you just need to get the bad energy out. Yeah. I used to run, and I love running, and I found that to be really great to get the bad energy out. But my knees are not so good anymore. So.
I know, right? I know. Well, and I think it's figuring out what works for you at that stage. And there's some days, I talk to people about that. There's some days where you might need kickboxing,
Certainly,
to deal with the energy that you're dealing with. And other days you need yoga. And some days it might be hot yoga and you're doing sitting and sweating, and other days it might be something else like restorative or just doing meditation.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
So, that's amazing. So where does inspiration come from for you? Like when you get ideas, where do they typically come from for you?
Well, I read a lot. I mean, yes. I really like, I'm a lifelong learner. I really like learning. I know you do too.
Me
and
too.
I'm sometimes I feel like I'm on that eternal quest to get the answers,
Right.
and recently I've been thinking about it a bit more deeply because some of the latest books that have been, everyone's like, this is the one you have to read, this is the one you have to read.
Yeah.
I'm not always, because I've read so many of them now, that I'm not always all that impressed with it. And I think at a certain point you have to sort of trust yourself too, and think deeply about what you stand for, and certainly always being open to other ideas. I don't mean that, but I'm a bit of a junkie when it comes to the latest ideas. I do love to read them all and be informed on them. So
I love that. I think it's interesting too. Yeah. So I'm a huge reader. Like I've always got a stack of I was going to say 20, but it might be more.
Oh, no.
More books next to my bed. But I think it's interesting, too, as you go through your life, that, a book that you might have read in your 20s, when you go back and you read it, I'm in my 40s now, so you go back and read it again after you've, experienced life and you've had all kinds of different things, different people that you've come across, the lessons that you learn from the same book are very different.
Very different.
Right?
I recently did that with Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
I should go back to that one.
Yeah, because I think that might have been one of the very first books I read that was in that genre.
Yeah.
And recently, actually, I listened to the audiobook, and I really enjoyed it. It's one that can really stand the test of time, for sure.
I love that. And so let's talk about that a little bit, because again, busy people, busy women. You are a fan of podcasts and audiobooks, right?
Well, yes and no. I mean, if I'm out for a walk and, in nature, I still just don't just walk in nature, unfortunately. Right. I should, but I still like to listen to something if I'm alone, obviously. Yeah. Or if I'm driving. I don't like just drive. I'm not a big fan of driving. Yeah. So I will actually carpool if I get the choice and talk to somebody, but if not, I will listen to audiobooks then. Yeah. But I am very much a visual learner, so for things to sink into my head, I do need to read them.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and we talked, another thing we talked about this morning before we got recording, we were talking about, the tips and tricks and things that we use to, either organize our time or, kind of learn better, if you will. So we're looking at your book, and sorry, I forget that people can't see my hands, so I'm pointing. But yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that, about organizing your time, and you're talking about colored markers. What are the things that you've learned over the years that work for you? Yeah,
well, this job, because it has so many different items all the time, at first I felt a bit overwhelmed by trying to keep track of things, because a lot of my job is to ensure, just from a high level, that we don't drop the ball on different topics. So I really struggled with trying to make sense of it all and what kind of system I could come up with so that I could, really be an effective leader. And my notebook is my Bible. I mean, it's really, really important to me, and it's a way for me to keep track of different things. But writing things down and sometimes color coding and highlighting, it's really helpful to me. I find it's the way. It is the way I learn is through writing to make sense of things. That's for sure.
And how about keeping track of time and where you're supposed to be and when? What are the things that you do for that? You have so many things that you have going on in a day.
Well, I have an assistant, so I have to say
I'm writing that down.
That has been mind blowing because having worked for so many years in a not-for-profit, where, your computer breaks down, you fix it,
Right.
And you're in charge of it all. And it's funny because sometimes people say to me, oh, it must be so stressful being the mayor. But in fact, running a not-for-profit where it's all on your back, that was a lot
and
more
running
stressful.
Things very lean, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't just hire someone or go buy something when you need it.
It is creative problem solving for sure when
Absolutely.
you're working for a not-for-profit. And so that has been pretty wonderful to have somebody who, she really controls my schedule. So I really just look at where she tells me to go.
You just show up and you're like, okay, gotta go.
I mean, I review it obviously the night before to ensure that I'm, prepared for the things that I'm doing the next day and that sort of thing. But that is pretty wonderful to have somebody do that. But it's also, that was a really interesting learning for me too, because to ask for help, and I wasn't used to that. Too. And I didn't really have anyone to ask for help too. But I mean, there's 650 employees at the City of Moncton. There's generally someone there who can, but when you're not accustomed to that, when you're not knowing that there's someone out there that can help you.
Well, and I think it's trusting other people too, right? Like if you're someone who typically makes a lot of things happen on your own, it's, first of all, it's asking for help, but I think second of all, it's trusting that whoever you're asking for help is going to either make the thing happen or give you the advice that you need and want.
Trust is a big one, that is for sure.
Yes. So tell me, if you had a magic wand...
I have a magic wand.
Oh, you do?
I do.
Oh, okay. We can talk more about that. So what would you change in the world? Or even if you just want to talk about in the city, like what would you change?
Well, I'm pretty distraught with the opioid crisis, I have to say. And I recently heard someone is doing some interesting research on even the medicinal effects of cannabis and how it might even be able to replace fentanyl use. And boy, I'm seeing the results of some of the opioid abuse and use in our community, and it's pretty devastating to families, all kinds of families. And so I guess if I had a magic wand that worked, I would find a solution to that, because it's pretty awful.
Well, and I think some of it, I mean, it's not a magic wand solution, but I think some of it is education for people.
Yeah.
I think it's awareness of the fact that it is a problem, and that everyone can be involved to find the solutions.
Yeah, and we're going to need everyone, because it's nasty. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so changing gears a little bit. What piece of advice would you give to someone who wants to go into politics, who wants to help make change in the world?
Well, you got to get out there.
Yeah.
It's networking. It's serving on boards, being uncomfortable, pushing yourself, and then really knowing what your strengths are. Yeah. Knowing where your space is, because you can't be everything.
Right.
It's impossible. So you need to dig down deep on certain things, and others you kind of have to, let other experts be the experts in those areas. But really, knowing your strengths and owning them.
Absolutely. I think that's the biggest thing. I think a lot of times, in the education system, and even when, people are reading all kinds of self-help books, a lot of it is geared towards your weaknesses, and I'm putting that in quotation marks.
For
weaknesses,
sure. Yeah.
Right? So it's like, okay, so you're not good at math, so let's give you all of the things that you need to do to get better at math, right? Yeah. When the reality is, if you're really good at writing, you're really, if that's your strength, then why not lean into the strengths more, and maybe you get help with math, or you hire someone,
exactly,
right,
yeah,
to help you with the things that you're not as strong at, right? So
yeah, and life's a lot more enjoyable as well when you're doing things that you love, and it comes through when you're doing things that you love. They're just so much more comfortable for you, and you're better at them. So
absolutely. So let me ask you this: so as as mayor, how do you get to infuse your personality and ideas into your role? Like how do you balance that?
Well, I mean that is a tough one, because affecting change is hard, But my mantra has been change the game, don't let the game change you, and so I think about that. a lot, and how I'm pushing and how I'm trying to affect that change. But a lot of that change has to come down to what my fundamental values are and articulating those. And so I've got it down to 2, they're easy to say. Yeah. But they're a whole lot harder to act on. So what do they really mean? So digging down deeper. So how can you act on them every single day in every decision that you're making? So that is, I think, pretty fundamental to that.
And so you were talking about digging deep and identifying your values. So did that, was that something that came easily for you to do that, or did it take, years of like kind of chipping away? Like how do you?
Well, it's been for sure. I mean, I would say that I haven't been a very strategic person with my life. I mean, I meet with a lot of young women.
Some people would be surprised, I think, Dawn, that you say that.
Oh no, it's been total serendipity. I would say. No, I'm really quite serious about that. But I do meet with a lot of young women today, and they have these strategic plans for their lives, and they're really on focus, and I really didn't have that. Really, becoming mayor is the only thing that I've ever really like written down saying, work toward this every single day. Right. And but as far as getting to those values and what you stand for, for sure, it's been a long process, and for many years I didn't really think. I just kind of went about it, not on automatic pilot, but I didn't think as deeply. And so those getting to those 2 top core values, but also knowing what you stand for and what you want to achieve and where you want to go and how you want to affect that change in the world. Because we're living in interesting times, man.
Listen, we don't even want to go down that path.
No,
right?
Thank you.
Would you be willing to share those core values?
Sure.
Us? Yeah.
So the 2 that I've really identified and trying to dig as deeply on us. And the thing about core values, they're different things to different people.
Absolutely. Well, even the words that you use.
The 2 words are optimism and courage. Ooh, so those are the 2.
Amazing.
Well, and so I try every day to be a positive person. Yes. And really challenge pessimism when I can. Yeah. We talked about trust, so I try to trust. That's been a hard one for me, and to be trusted, to collaborate. Collaborate is really fundamental in all of it for me too. I'm a big believer in collaboration and bringing people together. Yeah. Paying it forward and celebrating success. Because sometimes I've been one of those people that sort of do something and then just, okay, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? And not celebrating success enough. Sure. So those are sort of secondary, but that whole idea of courage and optimism and just really trying to live those 2 values in everything. And courage really pushes you because you say, oh, well, I'm going to be a courageous leader. Well, what does that really mean?
What does it mean? And what it means on one day might mean different. It might mean something different the next day, right? Or the next week.
And optimism too, because you know what? You can get dragged down to that pothole and the size of the pebble that goes in the pothole. You have to kind of bring yourself up all the time to really look at what the priorities are, where the changes are that you want to affect, and while still respecting the person who is obsessed about that pothole and the size of the pebble, and being compassionate and understanding where they're coming from. Absolutely. Right. But you also have to kind of lift yourself up to where where you can affect the most important change.
Well, and I think it's like, overall, I think it's trying to keep that perspective, right? Because the reality is, like, you are surrounded by people all day in your job. I mean, and I get that as well. So there's times where, you might be at an event and someone is talking to you about the opioid crisis, and then the next minute someone wants to talk to you about why their, garbage day got changed, right? And, the emotions that each of them bring might be, pretty intense. So I think it's trying to, remain grounded and, as you said, I think it's the importance of staying positive and remembering what you stand for and what you bring to the table. Yeah,
it's so important. It really helps when things go off track, which happens.
When things get derailed, right? Yeah. And and so how, when things kind of go go off the rails, what do you do? Like what?
I'm human.
Freak out?
Oh yeah. for sure I do. And I, you know, go to a bad place. And that's where it's, you know, coming back to the values, try to get a yoga class in, you know, or, you know, but, exercise, you know, sometimes when terrible things happen or something really awful that you're not either you've made a mistake or you're not proud of, or when someone that you trust and that you thought was a very valuable person to you, sort of something goes astray there. Those are hard things to deal with, and they can take you down the rabbit hole. And I go down the rabbit hole too.
Well, we're all, like you said, we're all human,
but sleep is so important. And those, you know, middle of the night worries, I really try really hard to avoid them. And so I, you know, even as far as, you know, having my sort of rituals before I go to bed to get rid of all that. And I know many people talk about the gratitude journal, but I tell you, that's pretty awesome when you can think of the great things that happened in your day.
Absolutely.
It really sets you up, I think, so that you change your brain so that you're not thinking of the negative. And that's, you know, that's a conscious intention to change that.
That's absolutely. I think, you know, when you're intentional about living your life, whether it's, you know, having an evening ritual, morning ritual, or like having a kind of a game plan, if you will, when things go sideways, like I think that's, you know, it makes a huge difference. You brought up sleep. So that's something that I'm chronically lacking. So I do have my kids are still young, but I want to talk a little bit about that. You know, I'm intrigued by that. So do you have a typical number of hours that you aim for?
Yeah. If I go to bed at 10 and get up at 6, things are good.
8 hours. Okay. And if less than that, it's like, it's kind of hit or miss.
No, and my family makes fun of me. Like a lot of them are night owls, and they really like to stay up late. And it's like 10 o'clock, I'm going to bed, and the party's still going. And I have to. I really have to. But
so you've got boundaries set around that.
And but 6 o'clock in the morning, I love mornings, and I love getting up. Before 6, not so much, but 6 is good.
That's funny. Yeah, and I think, you know, that applies to a lot of things. Like when you figure out what works for you, and just owning it. You know, we talked about strengths, and again, setting boundaries on, you know, how much sleep you need and what things need to look like. I think we need to be less apologetic about that. So.
And not getting on social media before bed ever.
Right. Yes, that's
or reading comments on any of the media. Oh, well, I don't
that could
actually.
Be a whole other podcast.
Yes, no kidding.
Dealing with
I
the
don't
haters.
Go there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, what's next for Dawn?
Oh, that's.
Or should I say? So we talked about this. I should say, what's next for Madame Mayor, Your Worship? Yeah.
Well, I haven't made any decisions yet, but I mean, I love our city. I think it's got incredible momentum. Amazing potential, and I'm very psyched for what's next for our city, and but I haven't made any decisions yet on what my next steps are.
Yeah, this was not a, like, no one planted me as a spy to ask you what's next for you, but you know, I really appreciate you being here. I love what you're doing for our community, and I definitely appreciate all that you do. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Angela.
Yes, so thank you so much, Dawn, for joining us today and sharing your story. I'm Angela Harris, and this has been episode number 2 of Dare to Transform, a Missing Link Technologies podcast in collaboration with Work of Heart. Have an amazing day. We hope you dare to transform.